All right, this is Jeannie Lewis. I was born in Australia. I live in Maroubra now. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me start chronologically, Jeannie. Well, thank you, of course, for having me. You can tell me about your upbringing, but especially related to your parents or around the time you were born, because I saw that Sam Lewis, your dad, he was a teacher. He was very active in the Teachers Union. He founded this special thing called the Educational Workers League, and then he was elected as delegate to the first UNESCO meeting in Mexico in 1947. What do you remember? What did he tell you about that trip?
Well, I was 2. He brought me back cards and dolls. I don't know about. And that's where my doll collection started, which is now in the doll. No, it's in the doll museum in Orange now. But and I had 2 dolls called Mittler and Lupe, and on that delegation that Sam went on was Jessie Street, very prominently women's advocate in this country, and Jessie gave me a book called Mittler and Lupe, so they became the names of the dolls. So I'm a 2-year-old, but that trip was my first connection to Mexico, and out of that trip he also brought, these are the things that I remember, he brought back some 78s, and they were mainly instrumental Mexican music, and I just loved them. We could dance to them, or in my own way. 2 or 3, I was 3 actually when he got back. And that was amazing. And he went to France as well, and he went to the United States on that trip where he was making inquiries about education in the United States. He met Paul Robeson, and he said he felt he couldn't wash his hand after that because they shook hands. And also he brought back a whole folder of 78s of Paul Robeson. I mean, that to me, that voice was just, And he was also told he'd never be allowed in the United States again. I don't know what he got up to. I've no idea. And he didn't want to go back anyway, so he never went back there again.
And what about, can you tell us a little bit anything about your mom, Ethel, and one specific thing that there was something called the Married Women Act, 1932 all the way to 1947. Can you explain what was that act?
Yeah. So when a woman teacher got married, she had to stop teaching. So Mum and Dad got married. Mum was in 1940 they got married, so she was 32. And finally, I thought it was 44, you might be right, 47, because 44 she was able to go back teaching. And her mother was looking after me when she went to work. And after about 2 years, Nan was forgetting to pick me up from the nursery school, so Mum had to stop teaching. And she went back teaching years later, after nursing her mum all the years, and she went back teaching and retrained as a librarian teacher because she had been a Latin teacher. She didn't want to be at the same school as I was at, and that's what would have happened as a Latin teacher. So, and it was when Sam was president that act got changed, the Married Teachers Act, while he was president,
Of the
Teachers Federation.
Okay, yeah. So, from your father's trip and meeting Paul Robeson, etc., you had a notion, maybe not the word itself, but of internationalism there, that you should care about the rest of the planet? Do they talk about it? How they instill that of you, that notion of solidarity international?
Yeah, I think just by example, but on a smaller level, like my parents never had a car, but I remember even when he was, I think, living here, so he'd already retired when they had arrived in Maroubra. He would travel from one side of, like here, to another part of, like the north side or somewhere, to see a friend who was sick. And that's what that to me is what I got taught, is you can blah, blah, blah about all the politics and doing, what, but if you don't learn to treat other people well, then you can forget it. And when Sam had the stroke, which he had in 1974 and never was able to speak again, Mum had telegrams from the most right of the right in the Union and his, longest standing friends. That to me is what I was taught, was you do. And when I was a little girl, because I was an only child, so you could play in the streets then, so that was great. And there were two Catholic families in the street, And we used to do water fights in the backyard and do circuses. That, to me, was what I learned. And also that I had to work at school, that I was to study properly at school, yeah.